Police brutality and race are at the center of some of the biggest conversations happening across the U.S.
Marches and calls for justice over police-involved incidents involving black men.
Protests across the country over videos showing the deaths of black men at the hands of police.
So often, black men are vilified.
But often left out of that conversation are black women who, like black men, are killed by police at a disproportionately high rate. And we found that the highest profile police killings of black women in recent years only got about 8% of the coverage that killings of black men received. These numbers shed some light on how we still don't say her name, and they show that whether the victim is a man or a woman, the big factor in police violence is still race.
My name is Katina Johnson. I am the first cousin of Charlena Lyles. On June 18, 2017, my cousin called the police for help to report a burglary. And the dash cam video shows the officers, she was killed. She was shot 7 times. At the most, she had a paring knife. And so even if that was the case, why was the result death?
Victims of police violence like Charlena are real people with real stories. So, take a minute. Which of these names do you recognize? These are all names of high-profile victims of police violence. But through a Newsy Ipsos survey, we found that some names are more recognizable than others. Overall, people are much less familiar with the victims on this list who are women. And most people say they haven't heard anything at all about the highest profile cases of black women killed by police, aside from Breonna Taylor. To understand why, we took a closer look at how these cases are covered. And to do that, we enlisted the help of Newsy data reporter Rosie Chima. Hi, Rosie. Thanks for joining us today. I really appreciate it.
Hi, Alex. Yeah, thanks for including me.
So yeah, we used the Say Her Name campaign and a report that they published in a big way to kind of look into their main focus of what kind of coverage are black female victims of police violence receiving.
In terms of the lens that the issue is being framed through in this national uprising, it was very much around Mike Brown and Freddie Gray, Philando Castile, Alton Sterling, and then Sandra Bland was sort of, and Sandra Bland. But it was seen as sort of a unique experience in a conversation that was primarily about black men. And I thought that in the wake of the killing of Mike Brown, it would be helpful to write a report, the full story of what the impact of policing is on black communities and how that plays out across genders and sexualities.
So we went through those 5 of the most trafficked news outlets and compared their coverage of black female victims post-Ferguson to 9 very well-known male victims from that same time period.
Yeah, and based on the number of articles that they appeared in, Breonna Taylor and Sandra Bland were by far the most well-known women on our list. Before this year, it was almost definitely Sandra Bland. She died in police custody in 2015. And we found almost 900 stories that mentioned her. But before this year, the most well-known male victim was Michael Brown, and there were 7,000 stories that mentioned him.
That is a huge disparity.
Also now the most well-known victim of police violence in the world, maybe of all time, is George Floyd. And his name appears in over 9,000 stories. And if we add up the 21 most well-known female victims in our data set, they appear in about 2,500 stories. And when you compare 9,000 to 2,500, that means that all of those female victims together got less than 1/3 as much coverage than a single male victim.
Research shows that if we look at gender and race together, black women are the group who are most likely to be killed by police when unarmed of any group, including black men. And that illuminates kind of how deeply entrenched perceptions of black women as inherently dangerous, deranged, threatening, animalistic.
And that impacts people when they are being policed, in addition to how police officers see Black spaces. If inner city places are seen as these types of, crime-infested places, that means that the people in those spaces, all of them, are criminals. And so I think there's this perception of who Black women are and the types of spaces that they reside in also are often criminalized. Police violence against Black women since the 1980s has gotten worse.
Drugs are menacing our society. They're threatening our values and undercutting our institutions. They're killing our children.
The folks that are largely impacted by those drug rates tend to be Black women and their children.
I'm laying there screaming, asking somebody to help my granddaughter because he just shot her in the head.
The case of Ayanna Stanley in Detroit, she was shot in the head by Detroit police officers because of a raid. Regardless if you are a law-abiding citizen who goes to church every Sunday or who goes to work, there's a possibility that your house could be raided. And this is what we see in the Breonna Taylor case, right? You see the police actually just going in, kicking a door in and not asking any types of questions.
Everybody there said they never heard the police identify themselves.
And then the folks who are in that house are not expected to protect themselves.
I know that, people say a lot about Black men that have been killed by the police, but they don't talk too much about the women that have lost their lives to the police use of deadly force.
I was just wondering what it's been like for you and your family since Charleena was killed.
To be perfectly honest, it has been an absolute nightmare. It's been 3 years and we don't even really know what happened, why it had to happen, and what you could have done differently. How do you heal? How do you move on? How do you begin to pick up the pieces of your life, knowing that it's already never going to be the same? So we're trying to save you and your family forever having to feel the pain that our family feels. And when people really grasp that and understand why we're out there, the fact that you guys aren't out there with us is crazy. You are no better than my family. What makes you think that it can't happen to you?
Megan Hockaday, Tanisha Anderson, Natasha McKenna, Michelle Cousseau, Alexia Christian, Deborah Danner, India Kager, Keisha Michael, Corinne Gaines, Ralkina Jones, Pamela Turner, Maya Hall, Aura Roser, Sandra Bland, DeCynthia Clements, Michelle Shirley, Charleena Lyles, Breonna Taylor, Tatiana Jefferson, Joyce Cornell, Janisha Fonville,